I want to explain what animation is and why you might want to use one if you're doing a PowerPoint slide. And we'll take a look at how to create one. Okay, and I'll show you on my Windows computer, but you can do it with other software also. Okay, so animation is motion applied to an object. So if you have an object, and we'll talk about what objects are in a minute, but motion, making something move, is a way to animate something, and particularly when it comes to PowerPoint. So if you have an animated movie or an animated cartoon, it's basically drawings and illustrations that are animated, but you can apply motions in PowerPoint also and make things move in a PowerPoint presentation. So that's what animation is, but an object is anything you put on a slide. So it can be a box, it can be text, it can be a shape, it can be a picture, it can be a graph or a chart. So anything you put on a slide is considered an object. And unlike a word or which allows you to type and you have lines of text, PowerPoint is more of a free form type of palette. It's a piece, think of it as a piece of paper, and you can put things on it and move them around wherever you might want to move them. And so that's what's considered an object. And all objects have these things called handles, which if you move your cursor over an object and select it, you would see the handle for that object, and that's how you select it to do things with it. You can delete it, you can change its size, you can format text, you can make it bigger or smaller. So that's what you do with an object when you have an object that you've selected. So we can apply motion to these objects using PowerPoint, and that's what animation is. So what can you typically animate? Well, you can make an animation that determines how an object appears. That's one type of animation. You can have an animation that shows how an object exits, and this line of text here is a separate object. So if I want to delete or have this object disappear, I can have an animation that makes it disappear. And I can make things move around the screen automatically by animating an object. So watch the blue circle shape and it'll animate and move. Okay, so these are the things you can animate and the types of animations you can do. And animations give you some options to control them. One of the things you can do is you can apply effects to the animation. You can determine how the timing works, what the sequence is, and when it starts, like if it starts on a mouse click, or if it starts right after the previous animation, or if it animates at the same time. And you can use things like the triggers, as I mentioned, the mouse click, or other types of triggers that take place. And you can do all of these things with any object on a PowerPoint slide. So they're really powerful tools that give you a lot of flexibility in making a presentation a little more dynamic, because people respond to motion. And if you just have lines of text on a screen and that's all people are looking at, it's easy to lose their attention. By having some animations and showing things in motion, it helps to attract and maintain people's attention. Now, PowerPoint's not the only thing that does animation. You can do animation with Apple Keynote, which is their slide software, or with Google Slides, or with a very popular graphics tool called Canva. They have a slide tool. Virtually every type of presentation tool out there has the ability for you to do some animations. PowerPoint has extremely powerful animations. Apple Keynote and Canva are also very powerful. I would say Google has some animations, but not as many as the other software packages do. So, but it's not like you're restricted just using PowerPoint. That's the only one that will do it. Other software will do it as well. Now, there's another type of motion in a slide presentation, and you can apply an animation to an object on a slide, or you can use what is called a transition, which applies motion between slides. Now, the most common transition between one slide to the next is just a what's called a cut, where one slide disappears and the other slide appears. Okay, so that's called a cut, but there are other transition effects that you can apply to create some motion between slides, and some of them offer some very interesting approaches that you can use. So this is an example of a transition from one slide to another. So this is one slide that appears, and I click to advance to the next slide, and you'll see a transition that makes it look like the slide is actually rotating in position. And so that's another way to add some motion to a slide presentation. And slide presentations that have motion, without going overboard on it, you don't want to have so many things moving that it distracts people from the presentation, but you can have some motion in it that gives people the sense that this just isn't a static image that appears on the screen all the time. So this is an animation of typing that you can use to type in and enter text. It brings up a list of presentations that I've been working on. I'm just going to start a blank one here, okay?
Mhm.
And we're going to just take a slide. We're going to create a new slide here. I don't like the title slide, but I want to create a new slide. And I'm going to just make it blank, because one thing I'll show you right away is how to edit, how to make an animation of a photo between one slide and another. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a photo, and I can take pictures from my computer or from stock images, and you can actually drag pictures over as well. But I'm just going to go to stock images because there's lots and lots of pictures here. And we'll take something like this and we'll insert it into our PowerPoint slide. Now you can see it has handles here. So I want this slide to fill up I want this to fill up the entire screen. So I'm just going to make it bigger like that. And now it fills up the screen. Now I could animate this image, but I'll show you, we're going to do a transition next. We're going to we're going to go back to home, and we're going to put in a new slide, and we're going to do another blank one. So there creates a blank slide here, and we're going to insert another picture from anywhere we want to. So we'll take another picture here like this, and we'll insert it. And that one's close. We'll make it a little bit bigger by grabbing the handle with our mouse. We can expand it and make it bigger. Okay, so now I have two slides. Okay, I have this blank one here, which is a title, and we can call it our family vacation. Okay, it's not really it, but it's pretty close. Okay,
Yes.
and we have slide one and slide two. Now, up at the top menu, there's this thing called transitions. And what you do is you apply the transition to the next slide you want to use. So I want the transition to go from this slide to this slide. So I select the slide, the one that I want to use next, and I go up to transitions, and then I have a whole range of transitions that I can use. There's all of them. This is just an amazing amount. So one of them, there's none, right? But I could use something called fade, and it'll show you a preview. You can always do a preview here of what it's going to look like to fade from one image to another. I can do a wipe. You can see how it just wipes across. I can do a split or a reveal or a cut is very quick. And there are also a lot of others that are here. The one I used in my slide presentation was this rotate. So that's a transition, okay? A transition is what you use between slides. So if you want to have a picture show and you wanted to run through all the pictures, you can just set up each slide with each image as a particular slide, and you can do transitions. Now let's go back home here and let's insert a new slide. Let's call it a blank one. And let's draw something here. We can draw, I'm sorry, we want to insert, I want to insert a shape. Okay, so I have lots and lots of shapes I can do. Let's take a rectangle, and I want to draw a rectangle. I can type on the rectangle if I want to, but I'm not going to for now. It's an object. Okay, so if I click outside of it, I've unselected it. If I click inside of it, you can see I've got it selected and my mouse has changed. Now I can go to animations. And animations give me the ability to have animations that are used for entrances, for emphasis, and for exits. Okay, and there's more effects that can be displayed here. So I usually just use a simple appear effect, and you can see there's a little number 1 that shows up here. And if I want to preview that, it'll preview it pretty fast, but it just gives me the ability. If I want to see what it looks like when I play the presentation, let's do this. Let's start with this slide and we'll play this. Okay. Thank you. Got it. And it's narrating for me. So if I click next, it does a transition. And if I click on the next slide, it's blank. But if I click on my mouse one more time, you'll see the shape appear. So that gives you the ability to do animations. So if I wanted to add something else to the slide, if I wanted to insert a picture, for example, I can just take any picture from anywhere I might want to use it and insert it. And I can make it smaller. Okay, so I'm going to drag it smaller. And now I want to have this picture be animated so that it floats in. You can see how it floated up. It's a little preview. So I have a preview. I have a slide that has 1, 2 objects that are animated. So let's play this slide from here, okay? So when I click on the mouse, I bring up that shape. And when I click on the mouse, I get the next image to appear. So that's what an animation does, is an animation lets you animate objects on a slide, while a transition gives you the ability to change what happens in between slides. And so animations are really useful, particularly for things like text. So if somebody wants to create a new slide and they want to use something with bullets, for example, they might have something where they have a title and some content here, and we'll say a vacation, places, and then we'll start a list of places. We'll talk about New York, we'll talk about Canada, we'll talk about California, we'll talk about Spain, okay? So if I just have this list up here, and it doesn't really look that interesting, okay? So what I can do is I can select this text, and then I can click on animations, and then I can have them appear, and I can have them appear in sequence. So right now they're all going to appear at the same time. What I want to do is I want to open up this thing called animation pane, and that gives me the ability to, an animation effects, that gives me the ability to change the timing of how these animations appear. So I'm going to move a few things around here. And if I want this one to show up second, I can change the sequence by affecting what is called the trigger. So you can see up here, there's something that says start with previous. Okay, so I have Canada selected here in the column here, and I want to start it on a click. So now it's changed to number 2. If I go to my next animation here, and I go to California, I select that, and I go to on click, it'll be number 3. And if I go to Spain and I go to on click, it'll be number 4. Now, there are some shortcuts to doing this, but I wanted to basically show you how to do this. Now, what'll happen is that New York will show up first, then, but you won't see Canada or California or Spain until I click on them, until I just click my mouse. So if I preview this, you can see there's the title, Vacation Places. When I click on my mouse, New York shows up, then Canada with the next click, California with the next mouse click, and Spain with the next mouse click. So you can see how using it with text gives you the ability to give people a sequence of when things show up whenever you're interested in having them show up. So it gives you a lot of capabilities, particularly with text and other types of things. Now, if I go back to my other presentation that I used, if I go back to the actual PowerPoint animations presentation that I was doing here, you can see that these items are animated 1, 2, 3. This is a video that's playing in the background. These objects all appeared at the same time. But when I look at this slide and I want to see what is happening on the animations, I can see that they are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And 5 has this funny little squiggle around it because it's a path that uses the ability to animate something in a path. And I chose a spiral shape that it works with just by applying. That's one of the animations you can use from this whole list of animations. You can see these different paths that can be used, and there are more motion paths that you can customize and bring in and do a tremendous number of them. So if I wanted to make this a curvy star, you can see how it becomes different. I can make it a figure 8 and it makes a funny shape like that, or I can give it stairs down so it walks down stairs, or I can spiral it right. But these are all different, what are called motion paths animations, or I can just change it to something simple and say grow and turn. Okay. Now it grows and that's it. Okay. So once you apply a new animation to something, you usually are going to replace whatever was there. So now this other animation is simply going to appear. If I want to go back to giving it a motion paths like a loop like this, I just have to reselect it again. And you can do that with text. You can do it with a picture. You can do it with any object you want to apply it to, because everything on a slide is considered an object whenever you're working with it. If you want to create a new presentation, a blank one, and you want to add a new slide to it, blank, and you want to insert a picture from your computer or from a stock image. It's not easy for me to use stock images. We'll take this one and we'll take this one. We'll take 2 pictures, then the other here. Let me select it one at a time. And I'll make one bigger and one smaller here. Okay, so now I can animate each picture separately. If I want to have it appear, one will appear before the other. But if I want to give it some fancy effects like say a swivel. You can see how it swivels into place now. Or I can give it an effect where it grows and shrinks so that it adds a little emphasis. Sometimes they can be distracting. So you want to be careful which ones you use. I like the float in effect. And let's apply a float in effect to this. So now I have two animations in here for two separate images. And if I click on the play option here and I click on my mouse, the first one up goes appears, and I click on my mouse and the second one appears. So you can even do this with more than one picture on a single slide if you're interested in doing that. And then when you're done with the presentation, you just want to make sure you auto save it or save it so you don't lose it. Once you start doing them, it's a lot of fun to do because they give you the ability to add a little bit of motion to your slide presentation as opposed to it just being a slide appearing one after the other. I've been doing animations a while and I would make mistakes at first too, but then I got used to doing them and I would do simple animations like appear. So if I had things show up in sequence, it was easy for them to appear in sequence. And then I got a little more comfortable with trying different ones out. I don't use a lot of different animations because it can become distracting in a presentation if you have a lot of different animations that you're being used. So I recommend you use one or two in any presentation or slideshow you do. And that way it'll be more comfortable for the people watching it. But sometimes you want to emphasize something really important. And so doing it with that, a special animation just for that. And you can always turn them off whenever you want to by just changing it and deleting the animations whenever you want to. Here, where you go to PowerPoint animations, doing something like this, where you want to have one object appear and another object appear, kind of makes sense on the same slide. But if you're looking at an animation where you want to have like one photo appear after another, like this, having separate slides probably makes more sense for that. So if we went to home and we did a new slide, we just created a blank one, then we can take this slide and move it over here. I think we can copy it and we can paste it here. It's easier to go from one slide to another if there are pictures and you want to show a difference in the pictures, just making the pictures filling up the maximum area on the slide as possible gives you the ability to makes it sometimes a little bit easier to work with than just by doing an animation. So it just depends on what you're doing, but the tools are there for you to do both if you want to and do multiple types of activities. So a simple transition would probably be a little bit easier here if I did a transition and we did, say, a fade, then going from this slide. Okay, now I'm just going through the editor here. If I want to preview what this looks like, I would go here and I'd click on preview and then it would I would actually play the presentation. I'd go to slide number 2. I'd start it from there and play, and you can see what'll happen. There's slide 1 appearing, and there's the transition to slide 2. Okay.
Ja. Und
So
das all
by using your cursor and your arrows will help you move from one slide to another. Now, I actually have two animations on this, which isn't always the best thing because, and so if I want to go to animations and I want to delete the animation, I can go to the animation pane here, and then you can see I have this animation and I want to delete it because I don't want the picture to wait for me to click on a slide for it to appear. I want it to appear right away. I'm going to move it around a little bit. So I think I made it too big for the slide here. There we go. That's a little better. Okay. So now instead of having that animation, I just have the transition from one slide to
Transition.
another.
Okay.
And this preview button gives you the ability to look at it. So it gives you that ability. But I also like just playing the slide presentation as well so that I can see what it looks like. This
Yes.
slide is blank because I still have an animation. That picture won't appear until I click on it. But now that I've eliminated the other animation on the other slide, and all we have is the transition will be the change of effect. Here we go from one slide to another. So you can use animations and transitions in a slideshow. Remember, transitions are what are between slides, whereas animations are what animate an object on a slide, as opposed to affecting what goes on between a slide. Insert a text box over these by going to Insert, and you can find the text box here, and you can start your text here and say garden or whatever you might want to label it, so you can explain it to people too while you're going through the presentation, because you can put text on top of pictures and you can format it and edit it whichever way you might want to. But that just depends on what you want to put on a slide. Anything you put on a slide is considered an object in PowerPoint terminology. So if it's an object on a slide, it can be animated. So there are some very sophisticated animations you can learn to do, but the basics are really just helpful to give you the ability to walk through topics and give people a better understanding and show things in sequence as they occur. And I use it a lot in my presentations to show things so I don't crowd things. Like in my agenda portion of the presentations, I'll show an agenda that I have appear one item at a time, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3 here on the text, so that when I play it and use it, nothing shows up, and I can direct people's attention more to what is animation, why use one, and how to create one, so that it doesn't crowd things up really a lot on the slide. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, will use a lot of text on a slide, and that makes it very difficult sometimes to understand and read. And if you have animation, you can direct people's attention to one point at a time. I could have even had that, first line of text disappear and then have the second line of text. So, but it was just as easy to have, there are only 3 lines of text, so it's easy to have them all appear and stay on the screen all at once. Just put together a slide presentation really quickly, and it's okay, but just a little more imagination, a little more effects that you can apply with just a click of a mouse, like these animations, just makes it so much, I think, so much more interesting for people, and helps them feel as though there's something happening that keeps their attention. We're very visual in terms of how we learn things. And so having some motion in front of us, even with a slide presentation, is a very effective tool.